Well, good morning. Good morning. It's good to see everyone. We are so very glad to have you here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you so much for being here on behalf of Power Engineering Magazine and Penwell Corporation. Welcome to the celebration we call Power Generation Week. This is the largest gathering of power professionals in the world. More than 20,000 of our closest friends will be attending this week's activities. On the conference side, we have recruited more than 300 experts to speak in nearly 80 conference sessions. On the exhibit floor, 1,400 companies will be showcasing their latest innovations and services. And you know, the thing people often tell me about PowerGen is this. When they come to PowerGen, they will either see something they never seen before, or they will hear an idea or a concept that they've never heard before. And really, to me, that's really what Power Generation Week is all about. It's a great way to explore your industry and talk face to face with the people who are willing to share their ideas and their success stories. So keep that in mind as you attend this week's activities. This week is also a celebration. It's a week of celebration and recognition of your hard work. We began the celebration last night at the Projects of the Year Awards at the KMA Event Center. It was a great night of fun. We handed out 5 Project of the Year Awards: Best Coal, Best Gas, Best Nuclear, Best Renewable, and for the first time, the Best Overall Power Project of the Year. So in case you missed it, here's a video profile of the winning projects. Let's take a look.
Best Renewable Project, Grand Ridge Energy Storage. This 31.5 megawatt project is the second largest lithium-ion battery storage system in the world. Operational since May of this year, the Grand Ridge Energy Storage Project was built in LaSalle County, Illinois at Invenergy's Grand Ridge Energy Center. The Energy Center is home to a 210 megawatt wind farm and a 20 megawatt solar plant. The storage project is capable of adding power and extracting power at a moment's notice. This allows grid managers to better maintain balance between supply and demand, which translates to a more efficient and reliable grid. The project uses BYD's energy storage system, which features the company's iron phosphate battery chemistry. This unique technology is environmentally friendly and the first of its kind. Best Coal-Fired Project, Yonghun 5 and 6. The 5,000 megawatt supercritical Yonghun power plant on Yonghun Island supplies about 25% of the electricity used in and around Seoul, South Korea. Together, units 5 and 6 can generate more than 1,700 megawatts of power. Both units began operating last year. Before the completion of units 5 and 6, the region struggled to meet its insatiable demand for electricity. To meet that demand, millions of dollars were spent every year transporting power supplies over long distances. The project's developer, Korea Southeast Power Company, overcame several challenges to complete the coal project, including stricter emission standards and public concern about climate change. The developers of the project responded by designing a plant with some of the lowest air emissions in the world. Best Nuclear Project, the Cook Plant Bridge Crane Installation. In preparation of a planned maintenance outage in 2016, American Electric Power embarked on an innovative and ambitious project at its Donald C. Cook Nuclear Generating Station in Michigan. The utility used an innovative system to install a 250-ton bridge crane to support a refueling outage. The installation was performed while the plant was online, using a pioneering system to lift more than 5 million pounds. During the upcoming outage, all 3 low-pressure turbine rotors and the high-pressure turbine rotor will be replaced. The installation of the bridge crane is expected to reduce the outage by 7 days, saving the utility an estimated $18 million. In addition, the project will save the utility time and money during all future maintenance outages. Best Gas-Fired Project and this year's overall Power Project of the Year, Warren County Generating Station. The Warren County Power Station is Virginia's largest gas-fired power plant. Owned and operated by Dominion Virginia Power, the 1,346 megawatt combined cycle plant began commercial operation in December 2014. Using 3 combustion turbines and a steam turbine, it is one of the cleanest fossil-fueled power plants in the U.S. The plant can generate enough electricity to power 325,000 Virginia homes and will help meet the region's estimated growth in demand. The $1.1 billion project was constructed by Burns and McDonnell and Zachary Construction. The plant features several innovations to maximize output, including a thermal energy storage system to chill the air supply for the combustion turbines. In addition to creating more than 100 permanent jobs, the project is expected to pump more than $35 million into the local economy each year. Congratulations to all of our winners.
Congratulations to everyone who took part in those projects. You can learn much more about all of these projects in the January issue of Power Engineering magazine. Now, one of the most important things in my life right now is a hashtag. Hashtag PowerGen Week. Here it is. Can you see it? See it in the back? Okay. If you see something on the exhibit floor that interests you, or if you hear something in one of our conference sessions that stands out, we would be very grateful if you would share that information on your Twitter account using the hashtag PowerGen Week. That would make me very happy, and that would make several people I work with very happy at Penwell. So thank you for doing that. Well, this week you have an opportunity to attend 4 great conferences and exhibitions: PowerGen International, Nuclear Power International, the Renewable Energy World Conference and Expo, and CoalGen. The content and the speakers for all of these conferences were selected by the people serving on these conference committees. And these power professionals work year-round on this event, and we ask a lot of them. Altogether, more than 150 people serve on these committees, and I am very grateful and honored to be a part of this highly regarded group of experts. So at this time, I'd like to ask the committee members who are here with us today to please stand to be recognized for all of your hard work. Committee members for PowerGen, REW, NPI, and CoalGen, thank you. Thank you for your commitment to these great conferences and to this great industry. Thank you. Well, the last time we were in Las Vegas, it was 2011, 4 years ago. And so much has changed in that short amount of time. We now have limits on CO2 from both new and existing power plants. You may have heard something about it. It's called the Clean Power Plan. And we will be discussing this very important plan in great detail in several sessions this week. We now have stricter standards for wastewater. We have new rules for how you store and manage coal ash. And we've rediscovered the benefits of combined heat and power, a very efficient form of generation and a rapidly growing market. And we are beginning to explore the possibilities of digitizing our power generation assets. I'm talking about the digital power plant, advanced analytics, and software solutions designed to make our plants more efficient, less costly, and easier to maintain. We'll be talking about these topics and much more throughout the entire week. We have a great keynote panel. I think our keynote speakers will address some of these very important issues. So let's go ahead and meet our first keynote speaker. Joe Mastrangelo is the new CEO of Gas Power Systems for GE Power. We're very lucky to have him here with us today. As you know, GE's acquisition of Alstom closed last month, and we're all very eager to learn more about the new company, GE Power. And Joe is here to shed more light on that and to share his thoughts on the global market for gas-fired generation. Joe is responsible for GE's gas turbine, steam turbine, and generator and controls businesses. Joe also served as CEO of GE's power conversion business. He has held many other leadership roles within GE over the years. He has a lot of great experience and knowledge. Please help me welcome Mr. Joe Mastrangelo.
Good morning, everyone. So what I thought I would do, given that the topic is delivering energy in an uncertain world, I thought I'd take a step back and think about what's the certainty I could bring to this would be if I was invited here to speak 10 years ago when I was working in GE's oil and gas business. What would we be talking about this morning? This morning we'd be talking about $200 barrel of oil, peak production, building gasification plants along the Gulf Coast in the US. Can we get renewables to be cost effective against traditional power sources? And if you think about those trends that we would have talked about 10 years ago and think about how right we would have been when we were talking about them, it kind of gives me pause before I go into my little 15-minute conversation about what means delivering power in an uncertain market. So what I would say is, I'm going to talk about some trends that we see, and I think we've all got to realize these, that every one that we talk about, you have to look at them at one side or the other, because I'm just waiting for the day when we come back after what you saw yesterday, and some of us will be saying to one another, well, oil's finally back to $40 a barrel. So think about what that means as far as how that relates to our industry. So I'll start off with kind of the recruiting pitch. As Russell talked about, I've been in my position here for 3 months, and this is really what my team told me was, when you look at the job that you're coming into and what we do as GE Power, it's as basic as, for those of you who were here in the warm-up here before the show started, they were playing the Rolling Stones' Give Me Shelter. And it's really like if they recorded that song today, they'd have to put Give Me Shelter with power. Because it really is one of the basic necessities that we see in the world. And when you think about what this means is, when you look around the world, think about one of the first things that we did as an industry, and I was involved in my prior jobs, was how do you bring stable power to Iraq? When you look at mega projects in Algeria, when you look at what's happening in Egypt, and you think about the certainty of this being a fundamental of modern life, you wonder about why we're talking about uncertainty. Well, when you think about the uncertainty, you got to look at what key trends are in our marketplace. So I come into my job and we talk about an industry that's going to grow 3% per year over the next 10 years. When you say that 3% number, you don't really get excited about it. But when you peel back and look underneath that about what's happening, the amount of efficiency gains that we have to be able to keep it to 3%, the amount of retirements that you see of technologies, what technologies are going to move as we go forward, what's going to happen with coal and nuclear as a power source, how gas and renewables interact with one another. And you start to see that uncertainty is probably the pessimist word for a more dynamic industry. And one of the things that I saw, because I started off my career in what is today GE Power, and I thought back to how we developed products. We would develop a gas turbine platform. That platform would last for decades. Maybe about the 5th or 6th year, we'd start working on a .02 of a model that we were out selling. And I look at where we are today as far as innovation and development. When you look at our HA turbine platform, we're already 18 months in launching the 7HA.02. When we ship our 10th unit, it'll be at the same cost position as the 50th unit of the most modern and recent F turbine that we're building. So you start to think about the speed at which our industry moves, it's changing, and how it interacts with one another. And really when I thought about what's the catalyst for the change around this dynamism that you see in the industry, I really think I've got the answer in my pocket, and it's fairly simple. I think this right here is probably the most profound change that we have in our industry. Let me tell you why. Think about the impact that this has had, this and other devices like it, have had on the demand curves of our industry. Think about how it's changed how we see demand throughout the day. Think for a second now about how these devices interact. And I want you to think about not just how the devices interact, but think about what we do from a grid stability standpoint. Right? Every one of us, we could take our phone, put our phones down on a table, and they're all the same phone. But every phone is different from one another because of the applications that we all use, how we configure them on the phone. So we all want to be independent, yet we want to be connected. And that, I think, as we look forward to energy grids, is what's going to be important, is to be able to allow that interdependency, be able to allow us to use tools the way we want, but allow them to be connected. The third thing I would say is an underlying shift in our industry when you think about what this does to our industry. Have any of you ever tried explaining to a 10-year-old what a payphone is, how to develop a roll of film, and why you need a paper map? Those are the conversations I have with my kids today. Now, my kids, hopefully, if everything goes well, will be working for someone in this room just 5 or 6 years from now. So those people are coming in being digital natives, where things that we think of as new are how they grew up. You take a picture, you look at it, you decide if you want it, you take as many pictures as you want. There's no cost to that. Now that's the positive side. Let me give you the flip side. Many of these people that are going to be coming into our workforce have never changed the oil in a car, have never changed a spark plug, don't know how to change an air filter, and they don't know how the real mechanics of things work. So our challenge is going to be, how do you bring in their thinking around being a digital native, but growing a workforce that knows how the real world, if you will, works. And what I worry about as a leader of a business is you can have great project managers that understand how to run Gantt charts and PowerPoint and all the digital tools that we have. But at the same time, the best project managers, the best engineers, are the ones that spend time out in the field touching the actual products that we install and build. So when you think about an uncertain or dynamic world, as I like to call it, those are some of the things that I think about when I think about where the industry is going over the next 10 years. Now, when you move forward, and Russell talked about the dynamic change that we have going on inside of GE. A month ago, we closed a transaction where we acquired Alstom's power assets. So far, it was a long closing process over 18 months. It gave us an opportunity to really get to know each other as a company. And in the first month that we're together, we see a great opportunity to serve the industry in a more effective way. The first thing is, when you look at our power business, and a short statement around what we think we have now is a great service capability and gas turbine portfolio that come from a GE heritage, and fantastic steam, HRSG, bottoming cycle, and expanded scope capability coming in from Alstom. We've added a global transmission capability to the business from the Alstom grid to our old, what we were calling digital energy, which was a distribution business, mostly North America based. And we now have an expanded renewables platform, adding hydro and offshore wind to the portfolio. So I think what we have here is the ability to better serve the industry and to be a true solutions provider to our partners around the world. We're pretty excited about this. Last week, we talked to our investors about the opportunities we see, not just on a synergy side, but also on a growth side, of how we think this helps us expand our footprint. And as GE goes back to becoming more of an industrial company, this is going to be the heart of what we do as we move forward. Now, being the gas leader here on the page, I wanted to spend a few moments to talk about some gas industry dynamics. I wanted to start off and talk about why right now is gas so popular. So if you think about our 3% growth, gas is forecasted to grow 50% over the next 10 years. We do have the lowest capital utilization per kilowatt. Now, once again, if I take a step back and think, if Russell had invited me here when I was in my job leading power conversion, I would have been up here giving you a presentation about driving solar inverters to 4 megawatt size with 1.5 kV capability. Why were we trying to develop those products? And those products have been introduced to the marketplace with First Solar and NextEra. It was to drive solar down to parity on gas. It was to take the copper out of a solar field to reduce the operating costs to be able to do that. So although you stand here today and you say gas at $700 a kilowatt is twice as competitive as solar and wind, you still need to think about what's going to happen as we move forward. And I think one of the projects that we saw that won last night around battery storage, there's a technology that we all need to think about that's going to challenge what we see, the dynamics that we see on this page of how gas remains a competitive fuel source in the marketplace. Next one, who would have ever imagined that a 500 megawatt gas turbine would be starting and stopping multiple times in a day? So if you look at that green line on this chart, that's the actual combined cycle power plant output of a given day of one of our turbines here in North America. You think about the old dynamics, start it up, let it run, hopefully it gets to the service interval, take it down, service, start it up, let it run, pretty stable. Going back to this uncertainty dynamic environment, today we're designing gas turbines that in 10 minutes get to simple cycle operation and in 30 minutes get to combined cycle operation. So how quickly can you bring a gas turbine online, and how can you provide better tools to allow that to sync to the grid faster so that you can balance the intermittency that occurs with renewables. The next one, time to power online. You know, again, when you think about the months that we talked about, and I do want to talk about how in the industry today, our goal as a partner is to get as fast as we can from financing to power on the grid. Today, when you look at our combined cycle offerings, we're in a 24-month cycle time. If we could do something around simple cycle on gas with trailer-mounted aeroderivative units, we can do that within a month. We've done that around the world. I think the challenge that we have as an industry is how do we keep reducing that cycle time as we move forward, and I'll talk about some ideas around this. And one of the things that I bring in, coming from having spent over a decade in the oil and gas industry, is how can we get more module capability into the industry to reduce the construction time. Going back to the workforce capability as we think forward 10 years, think about our resource constraints around craft labor, welding, and things like that. How can we use a different way of constructing a power plant to reduce the amount of months it takes to bring that power plant online? Next one, highest power density, 1,000 megawatts in a 12-acre plot. When you think about a recent project that we won in Pakistan, that one project provides 20% of the power for Pakistan going forward. So this is a great technology to be able to bring large blocks of power online without taking up the high acreage that you see with renewables, and we think that will continue, and that's why you see the big shift from F-class to H-class technology in the industry. Finally, right now, we do have very affordable, very abundant natural gas. We've got to think about, if you look at the numbers here, where today, given efficiency gains and pricing, a gas turbine is 35% more economical than it was 5 years ago. But if we had gas pricing equal to 5 years ago today, it would only be 7% more cost effective. So we as an industry can't rely on Henry Hub gas staying in the $2 range. That's not a long-term reality. What we need to be able to do is continue to drive that 63% combined cycle efficiency up towards 65% combined cycle efficiency, because that's what's going to continue to keep gas power generation as a competitive technology into the future. Now, how do we think we do that is when you, again, think back to what I talked about with Alstom coming into GE, we now can provide power island solutions. Alstom had full scope plant capability. I want to say to all of our EPC partners in the room, we don't want to be an EPC. We do want to partner with you and take the Alstom expertise to allow us to be a more effective equipment supplier, to bring great HRSG technology coming from the old combustion engineering, to bring the steam turbine and the critical steam turbine expertise from Alstom and tying it into the gas turbines that we have in GE. But really, when you look at this as an overall offering, is how do we use these combined efforts to really take margins out of our designs and allow us to increase the overall plant output on a dollar per kilowatt basis. Now, that's the physical world of what we want to do with the actual assets and equipment that we build. I do want to spend a moment around the digital world, and I want to spend a moment on two concepts. On the left-hand side of this page, I want to talk about what we call the digital thread. So the digital thread for us is no more paper drawings. So you build an engineering model. If you as a customer want the design on paper, you can print it out. But our engineering model goes directly to the shop floor. The shop floor manufactures off of that engineering model. What we're finding as we've done this on the HA class turbines is that we manufacture to much tighter tolerances. At the same time, we've invested in a $250 million testing facility in Greenville, South Carolina. that allows us to run our equipment harder than you ever will out in the field. It allows us to take the compressors to the surge point. It allows us to look at where failures are on the hot gas path. It allows us to be a more reliable, more bankable gas turbine provider. But what it does is, if you go back to what I was talking about on this continuous cycle of innovation, so no longer thinking of a product portfolio in decades of refreshing it, but in months, is we can now take that data from the test stand, incorporate it directly back into the engineering models, put them back on the shop floor, and improve the performance of the gas turbine. This is something we're very excited about as we look at not only our gas turbines, but also what we can do in the other key components and technologies of combined cycle technology. Then on the far right, this is our Predix. Predix is the open architecture that we've developed where we're building applications, and we launched 3 applications back in the fall and September. The 2 biggest ones I'll just spend a moment on. One is going back to helping digitally start up the gas turbine faster and helping the power plant sync into the grid easier. And this software is available to develop other apps on. It doesn't have to be GE developing these. It's an open structure, just like the iPhone that I put out there. And I think there's a big opportunity for us to continue to drive productivity in the marriage of the physical and the digital world to improve the performance of the overall operating architecture of our plants. Now, just in closing, look, we are committed to be a partner as GE. We're committed to be a partner across multiple technologies. Going back to where I started, it's not going to be one technology. It's going to be multiple technologies that interact with one another in the most effective means. We believe now with Alstom coming in, we have a great portfolio that allows us to have expertise across those technologies into the grid, out to the consumer. Continuously innovating and bringing you the best technology in the marketplace. And we're committed to take this innovation from 62% to 65% to bring more benefits as a combined cycle gas turbine provider to the industry. Because if you look at, as we look at our new tagline for our business, it's all about not stopping until the entire world has power, which is a key necessity when you think about food, water, shelter with power. Thanks for listening, and have a great conference.
Good job, Joe. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. That was a lot of great information in a short amount of time. Where we are about to go social media. Before we meet our next keynote speaker, I'd like everyone to say hello to Stephanie. Stephanie is a member of our social media team at Penwell, and she is here to take a group photo of our keynote audience. She'll be taking a panoramic photo. We are going to post the photo on the Power Engineering Facebook page and the Power Engineering Twitter account. So, on the count of 3, everyone say biscuits. 1, 2, 3. Biscuits. All right. Very good. Thank you, Stephanie. We would love it if you would go to our Facebook page and tag yourself in that photo. We also want you to find the photo on Twitter using the hashtag PowerGenWeek or the Power Engineering Twitter account. Once you find it, we would love it if you would retweet the photo as well to all of your followers. All right, very good. Well, our next keynote speaker is Steve Berberich. Mr. Berberich has a very exciting and very challenging job. He is the president and CEO of the California Independent System Operator. California ISO is one of the world's largest transmission organizations, which manages the grid for 30 million people in California. The California power market, to say the least, is complicated, and it is facing unprecedented changes. Steve's leadership has been very influential in the transformation of this industry. He's been recognized as one of America's 10 most influential energy leaders. Steve and his team at California ISO are responsible for making sure supply and demand are in perfect balance. He has overseen the integration of more renewable power than any other region in the world. We're very lucky to have him here with us today. Please put your hands together for Mr. Steve Berberich.
Well, hello everyone. As I was introduced, I'm Steve Berberich, the CEO of the California ISO. And I guess what I would tell you is I'm the future that you too will see one day. And what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes and tell you about what's going on in California, because I think it really is a harbinger of things to come. First, let me thank all of you. You know, every day pumping out the electrons that are taking care of the hospitals and increasingly charging vehicles and helping us do what we need to do to enjoy our lives and to support our economy. And I think we all have to take a step back at some point to realize what we're doing as an industry to be able to do these things. But let me tell you a bit about the California ISO. Let me tell you a little bit about the California story. We've embarked on a very ambitious renewable integration effort, and renewables in California don't include the hydro fleet, so it's largely wind, solar, and geothermal that are powering our change. We now have, on our 50,000 megawatt peaking system, about 13 to 15,000 megawatts of renewables. Any given day, we may have 6,000 megawatts of solar, 5,000 megawatts of wind, a few thousand megawatts of geothermal. And in fact, this spring we had several occasions where 40% of our load was met by renewable power. So we're moving up that curve. We're moving to 33% by 2020, but we've recently decided as a state that we want to move to 50% by 2030. 2020 is 4 years away. 2030 is 15 years away. So we have to get on this and get on with this quickly. But I'd like to tell you what it means to the grid as you can get your mind around the changes. Clearly, there's much going on. You may say California's crazy. It may be. But it also could be an idea of where things might go in the future for all of you. You all know that we have the Clean Power Plan that impacts things beyond California as well. And I would argue there may be a change of administration, but there's going to be a continuing clarion call for decarbonization of the electric grid, and we should all be prepared for that. We have the growth in utility scale generation. But we also have in California a dramatic growth of distributed generation, 7,000 to 8,000 rooftops a month that are being added to our system. So then you have to take a step back and say, what does it look like? What does that do to the system? And this is our duck. It's famous. Our duck is famous. It's been around the world. This is the California duck chart, and it looks like a duck. That's why we call it that. We're pretty sharp like that. Now, what it tells you, though, is this is a net load curve. We take our demand curve, and then we take renewables out of it. And this is the curve we need to follow with our generation fleet. And you can see the belly of the duck continues to get lower and lower and lower every year. And what you see then is the addition of renewables onto the system, solar, wind, and other things. And what they do is they press the duck lower and lower and lower. And this is how we expect the system to operate. And this is a view, you can see the low end of the duck by 2020 at about 12,000 megawatts. So that means several things to us. First, it means that we have the specter of overgeneration. And I'm going to talk more and more about that. This slide talks about it as oversupply, but we expect to have significant oversupply in California. And I have a slide, my next slide is going to talk about that. The second thing about the duck, though, is you can see that the ramps increase significantly, both the ramp in the morning down and the ramp in the evening later. This ramp right now is about 6,500 megawatts over a 3-hour period, growing to 13,000 megawatts over a 3-hour period. So, as a generating fleet, what's important to us then? The important thing to us is that plants can start and stop and ramp very quickly, and that we can turn them off in the middle of the day so they don't exacerbate this overgeneration. Capacity will no longer be the coin of the realm. Capability will be the coin of the realm. And in fact, we're changing our markets so that they compensate for the ability to handle the intermittency on the system, to be able to start and stop and ramp like we need. The other thing that we have to contend with is oversupply. And this is a view of what our oversupply looks like in the next decade or so. This is a chart out to 2024, and each dot represents an hour where we expect to have oversupply. Quickly, you should come to this. One is that oversupply is, most people think it'll occur in the shoulder months, certainly predominant then, but it's also going to occur throughout the year. And on a normal spring day, our load in California would be about 28 to 30,000 megawatts. In the spring, we will have an additional 13,000 megawatts of generation. What do we do with that? How do we handle it? First, as I said, we have to push down the system load, the system generation as much as we can to accommodate that. And that'll be our first step. The fleet will have to be retooled. The fleet capabilities will be different. Secondly, we have to find places to put this generation. What we don't want to do is be in a place where we create an economic and political nightmare because we've turned off the renewables because we had to have thermal resources online to be able to meet that evening ramp. That's a non-starter. It's a problem. It's really hazardous to ISO CEOs. So it's a self-preservation issue for me to be able to handle all this overgeneration. To decarbonize the grid, we certainly want to get rid, or we want to use the power for renewable, or for electrifying the transportation system too, and that'll be a key place for it. But let's talk about that for a second. 13,000 megawatts over generation. Now we can build a bunch of desalination plants because we need water in California. They're 25 megawatts apiece. That's not going to be enough. I can charge 3 million electric vehicles all at once, and I can get 1,500 megawatts. That's not going to handle it either. So I make dents in it, and I've got to have a series of base hits that you can see here on this chart. We have to change the way the demand curve looks. It has to be rethought. In fact, our planners have to move to where they look at a system that's a renewable base supplemented by thermal resources as opposed to a thermal-based system supplemented by some renewables. It's a complete change of thought. So oversupply will be our biggest issue. Now, the other thing we can do about it, and this is something that we're working very hard on, is we can collaborate more regionally. Because if you're a state that resides next to California, guess how much when we're in oversupply power goes for? It's cheap, or zero, or negative. Why wouldn't you want to use that power? And if you were a state surrounding California and you have a coal-based situation, you've got to adapt to the Clean Power Plan. This is a win-win proposition. You can derate or lower or decommit your thermal resources and use some of this power, and that's exactly what we're doing. We are working regionally on two fronts. Number one, we're a single state ISO right now, and if you think about it, all of our solar resources are in one spot down in the southern part of the state. Solar diversification works much better east-west diversified. All of our wind is generally in the same place. So we know regional provides a portfolio effect, but it also provides a place for us to put our overgeneration. And it's going to be a win-win proposition. Pacific Core, in the orange in this chart, has recently indicated they're interested in joining our balancing authority. Why do they want to do that? They want to get the cheap power out of California. We've also rolled out an energy imbalance market, which is a 5-minute market, to Portland General, Puget Sound, Pacific Core, and Arizona Public Service. We currently have NV Energy and Pacific Core operating on that system. But let me say this, and let me wrap this way. California, again, people consider us to be crazy, but I would say to you that it's really a laboratory for a movie that's coming to a theater near you. And I think we all have to work together and learn from the experiences that we have to know what the fleet needs to look like, to learn how to handle and adapt to overgeneration conditions, to handle the intermittency. And all of you in this room will play a critical element in helping decarbonize the grid as we go forward. I look forward to working with all of you. I look forward to continuing the dialogue. I look forward to decarbonizing the grid as we move forward. And with that, I appreciate all the time today. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, Steve. Before we meet our next keynote speaker, we have a special announcement. I would like to announce who this year's PowerGen Woman of the Year is. We actually announced the winner last night at our awards dinner and this morning in our print show daily. But in case you have not heard, we put together a video profiling this year's PowerGen Woman of the Year. Here she is.
Kim Green is a 24-year veteran of the power industry, beginning her career as an engineer with Southern Company in 1991 and ascending to leadership roles at Mirant and Tennessee Valley Authority before returning to Southern Company in 2013 and taking on the role of Chief Operating Officer. Green is responsible for overseeing system operations at Southern Company, which include generation, transmission, engineering and construction services, system planning, research and environmental affairs, as well as the company's competitive wholesale generation business. She says she has most enjoyed working on complex projects that are changing the way we produce energy, such as the clean coal technology at the Kemper County Energy Facility in Mississippi, and 2 new nuclear units at Plant Vogtle in Georgia. Professionally, she credits a variety of mentors over the years who have provided great examples in how they approach personnel or business issues, along with delivering constructive feedback and effective coaching. Because of her great accomplishments in advancing the power generation industry, Penwell is pleased to name Kim Green as the 2015 PowerGen Woman of the Year.
Big congratulations to Kim Green. Well, our next speaker is Stu Hemphill. Mr. Hemphill is the Senior Vice President of Power Supply and Operational Services for Southern California Edison. Southern California Edison supplies power to 14 million people in California, and Mr. Hemphill is responsible for the development and operation of the utility's solar, hydropower, and gas-fired power plants. He also oversees power contracting and the management and dispatch of the company's power supplies. Mr. Hemphill also served as the company's chief financial officer for a time. He has held several other positions at the utility and has been instrumental in the company's success. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Stu Hemphill.
Thank you, Russell. Hey, wow, what a great crowd. You guys look great this morning. Hey, so I'm going to talk a little bit about where California has been and is going. That's a little bit of, I think Steve's helped me out a little bit in talking about the challenges that he's facing. I'm going to expand upon that and look at the entire industry. So in full fairness, the picture you're looking at right now is the city of Los Angeles. And Southern California Edison actually does not serve this city. So I thought I would be just transparent about that. We do serve many areas, but it does represent an icon of California, so I thought I'd start with that. But this one, oh, there it is. That one should look a little more familiar to you. So this is the city of Los Angeles, or Las Vegas, right? So this is what it looks like at night. Is it just me, or do you, when you take a look at this, do you see a lot of big, beautiful energy customers? That's what I see. And so this is a really an icon. I mean, Las Vegas is an icon of an adult playground. And so I think, Southern California Edison, we want to make sure that we're an icon in the industry as well, trying to make sure we are bold and innovative and changing where the industry is going. So our mission is pretty basic. It's to safely deliver reliable, affordable, and clean energy to our customers. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing there. That sounds very simple. What we're doing is very complex. First of all, we have a very unique vantage point. For those of you who do not recognize this, this is the Griffith Observatory in Southern California over LA. So it is used for stargazing. We do have a unique vantage point. California prides itself in its ability to not only change its own industry, but to change the industry overall. So as I think Steve mentioned, our past is your future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we've been and where we're going. And what we do, let me just flip through these really quickly, or I'm going to be here forever. We do feel compelled to change things in a very big way. And we want to lead the industry, and we're very excited about where the industry is going. So let me talk a little bit about that. So the changing industry for us began in 1978, as it did for many companies out there, with the Public Utility Regulatory Policy Act of 1978. And that introduced competition in generation. And so we also had California restructuring, which provided even a greater level of competition in the generation side. From Southern California Edison's perspective, we originally owned most of our own generation and relied very little on contracting. But today, about 85% of our generation comes through power contracts, and about 15% is utility owned. It's a very competitive market, and it's growing every year. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. In 2010, we had what's known as FERC Order 1000, and this introduced competition in the transmission sector of the business. And I'll tell you, in the last year, the 3 California independent or investor-owned utilities have all bid on transmission projects that historically would have been theirs, and all 3 of us lost. So this is a wake-up call for us to game up, get ready, and prepare more so that we can be prepared for the competition that's coming. It's already here in transmission and will be going forward. So that's where we've been. But the big changes we're seeing now are actually on the right-hand side here. And that's in the distribution. In 2015, we filed what's known as our Distribution Resources Plan. This will be the first element of competition being included in our distribution part of our business. And then finally, the customer side, the retail side, which has been going on for quite a while. We had direct access, which allowed for retail competition back in 1998. We have something called community choice aggregation, which is open and available today. We're actually starting to see that grow substantially in California right now. And then, of course, we've had a number of subsidies for at the retail level for solar and distributed generation. So we're reading the signs. You guys notice we're starting to see California show up a lot here. Here's the Hollywood sign. So we're reading the signs, and for us, where it's going is all about customers. So let me talk a little bit about what's going on. First of all, customers don't know what they want, but they do want choice, and we understand that. And so we need to develop a grid that will allow customers to choose. That's the nature of where we're headed. We are designing a 21st century grid today in preparation for where customers are going. We do need to be prepared for technology, because technology doesn't wait for regulation. We've seen that, I think Uber it provides a great example, and there are many others. I also like to think of Napster, which completely revolutionized the recording industry and the distribution of music. So the question is, how will technology change what we're doing in the industry today? We see technology as a bridge. Can I ask a question? So how many of you drive an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid? Wow, okay, so not very many. I'll tell you, I asked that question a couple of months ago in California. I would say about 15% of the people at the conference were driving an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid. We are seeing a very big transformation there. But let me ask the next question, because here's the trend. How many of you don't have a car and never plan on having a car? So when I was in a conference 2 months ago, I would say there was probably 10 to 20 people who raised their hands. That's where things are going. That could be very disruptive in the automobile industry if it actually becomes more prevalent. But we do see technology as a bridge, and it won't be long. So when I think about where things are going, I can see adaptations of things that become commonplace in other parts of industry. For example, I have car keys for my car, but you know what? I don't put them in the ignition anymore. Why is it that I have to put a key into the front door or back door of my house? Don't need it. Very soon you can see how that very simple adaptation can change the way we actually get into our house. And in fact, why not? Why does we even need to turn on our lights? If we're coming in and our back door or front door recognizes by our touch that we are entering the area, the lights can come on. And frankly, my phone knows where I am at all times. It's easy to see a simple adaptation where the phone can communicate with a thermostat and the heat or cool can come on within a certain range. Very simple. But the one that I always like to think about, one that I think is really interesting and compelling, is coming down in the morning and opening your front door and you find a gallon of milk. Why? Because your refrigerator knows that your old milk has expired. All of that technology exists today. So these things are just mild extrapolations from where we've been. Our job is to make sure that we have a grid that allows for those things to occur. Yep. So last year, where we've been has been a one-way power flow. So it starts at the central power plant, goes on to transmission, goes on to subtransmission, goes to distribution, and ultimately to customers. But we need power that goes in and out of the grid. So we're going to be designing a two-way power grid. That's where we're going right now. That's what we're doing. That's where we think it's necessary for the future of this industry. So in California, we have what we call preferred resources. And that includes energy efficiency, demand response. We're also including storage and all forms of distributed generation. We are growing in those areas substantially. We are seeing thousands of new installations of rooftop solar every month, and demand that's even higher than that. So our job, again, is to strengthen the distribution system, build that two-way flow. We also need to make sure that we have a resilient and secure grid. That's just the nature of our business. So we need to have good monitoring and controls for these systems, and that's where our new investment will be. So as we think about the design, we're looking at a cleaner grid with less dependence on fossil fuels, and we're also looking at distributed energy resources as a potential substitute for traditional distribution investment. It won't be 100% substitute, but you can start to see how we can rely more on solar, storage, energy efficiency, and demand response to meet local needs. And we're already starting to do that. I'll talk about that in a little while. Yep, it's an exciting e-ticket ride, which does date me because Disneyland stopped using e-tickets about 30 years ago. So, but the thing about front-of-the-line passes, so it's a very good thing at a very good resort. When you think about what we're doing in the industry, everything is very large. And I think Steve Berberich actually brought it up a little earlier. On the renewable side, it's all about quantity. And we actually have over 7,000 megawatts of renewable generation in contract delivering today. 7,000 megawatts. That doesn't include the rooftop solar, and it doesn't include large-scale hydro. So this is mostly wind, solar, and geothermal. We go out every year. We have 1,000 megawatts coming online that came online in 2015. We will have 1,900 or 1,900 megawatts more coming online in 2016. So that's where we're going. That gets us to 24% renewable energy in 2015. We need to double that over the next 15 years. So it's very big opportunity here. We also have our preferred resources pilot. In California, it's all about location. It's certainly true for this too. So we're trying to see if we can rely on distributed energy resources, including solar, storage, energy efficiency, demand response, all the local resources to meet local needs. We're doing this. We actually have a 300 megawatt pilot. We've got 90 megawatts that we've secured to try to make sure that we're doing all we can to meet that local need. We presently have an RFP out, request for proposals out, for 100 megawatts more. And if we are able to do this, we certainly will expand it. But this will be our first way of looking at technology as a substitute. So distributed energy resources substitute for either distribution or fossil-fired generation. We also have done what we called our local capacity resource solicitation, and that was, we executed over 2,200 megawatts of contracts. It was competition amongst every type of technology. We had storage, 261 megawatts of storage that we executed contracts for in this particular solicitation. That is very groundbreaking. 1,700 megawatts of new natural gas-fired plants. Also, energy efficiency, demand response, things on both sides, either on the customer side of the meter or on the wholesale side of the meter. And in fact, we used an old friend. Ice storage is a good fraction of the storage that we executed contracts with. So every type of technology is the first that we're aware of that actually compared head-to-head these variety of resources. We'll be doing more of that because it's becoming increasingly important to find ways. If we're going to achieve 50% renewables, we have to find ways to make renewables produce what conventional power used to produce for many years, 100 years. And then we also have emerging technologies. We had storage solicitations. We executed 16.3 additional megawatts from storage. Our grand total is about 580 megawatts that we're seeking through storage contracts. So we're doing this every other year. We'll be doing it in 2016, executing new contracts. So we have many battery manufacturers who are involved, or entities out there using battery technologies, also ICE technologies, as I mentioned. So there's actually quite a bit of competition that's taking place already in the storage industry. We had more than 700 offers the very first time out to help meet our storage needs. So that is a big growth area for us. And then I mentioned the distribution resources. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the plan here so you understand it. But the idea, see if we can get through here. We're starting by taking a look at how we do distribution planning and how can we incorporate the distributed energy resources, that's energy efficiency, demand response, distributed generation, in our distribution planning so that we don't need to rely on traditional wires as much. We're taking a look at that. Of course, we're going to see who's going to compete for those potential opportunities. That's where it starts. We're doing capacity and location analysis. So we're trying to figure out where distributed energy resources can produce, where we have capacity, and what the locational value is for each of those resources. We're going to provide a tremendous amount of information to the market so that third parties and customers can find ways to work together better. And we are also doing some demonstration projects to see how we can use our own money and our own resources to displace distribution equipment with distributed energy resources. So that's what we're doing. Here's how we're doing it. Ultimately, we're going to be looking at promoting customer choice. We want to make sure customers have what they want. That's what we heard from them. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to set this up. We're going to give them the opportunity. If we do it right with our grid, they should be able to plug and play any resource that they have. That's where we want to go. That's going to require a tremendous amount of investment from us just to make sure that we have that resilient grid and also the monitoring and controls necessary to manage distributed resources to meet the local needs. Of course, it has to be safe, reliable, and resilient, or we shouldn't be in this business. Those things are things that you just simply cannot take any chances with. It needs to be affordable, and we also need to make sure we rely on competitive processes, which have been a huge part of how we get power in the past. So we need to make sure that we're relying on those to make sure customers get what they want. So when we take a look at where we've been, this is a picture of our Big Creek. That was circa 1913, so it's a hydro facility in the Sierra Nevadas. And I bring this up because it is our company icon. It is how we founded the company. It required the resolve, the technical innovation, and the commitment of employees to achieve the vision. It's a series of 8 interconnected dams. It's quite a remarkable feat, especially since they didn't have helicopters or GPS at the time. So it was truly amazing, truly an inspiration. We can rely on the very same type of innovation, skills, and employee commitment to achieve this new vision. So that's our icon. That's where we're going. I'm inviting you as we go through this process, and I understand there are many people representing many generating companies and possibly storage companies. Get involved in California. Come help us out. Achieve our own icons, your own icons status by helping us achieve our vision. That's where we're going. That's all I have for you today. So thank you very much. Enjoy your time this week.
Appreciate it. All right, thank you, Steve. We're throwing a lot of information at you in a short amount of time, and just want to remind you about that hashtag PowerGen Week. You may notice we asked you to silence your phones, not turn them off. So feel free to tweet out what you hear and see during the keynote session. All right, our next speaker is Stephen Edwards. Mr. Edwards is the chairman, president, and CEO of Black & Veatch, one of the largest engineering and construction companies in the world. Mr. Edwards is an engineer with a wealth of experience. He was named chairman, president, and CEO of Black & Veatch in November 2013. Before that, he served as executive vice president and oversaw the company's EPC business in energy. He has held many other roles at Black & Veatch, including director of engineering and procurement and manager of projects. He has managed a wide range of power projects in Asia and the Americas. He is a man of great wisdom and great experience. Please welcome Mr. Stephen Edwards.
Thanks, Russell. My intent today is to share Black & Veatch's perspective on the global power market. I'm going to do that given our background as an engineer constructor. So you may see and hear some differences from the prior presentations. I think you'll see a lot of similar items as well. But before I start, get the clicker going. Before I start, I'd like to give a quick profile of Black & Veatch. We were fortunate enough to celebrate our 100th anniversary this year after being founded in 1915. We had a grand party in August of 15 with our professionals scattered around the globe. And Black & Veatch's mission is building a world of difference. And we accomplished that by delivering critical human infrastructure in the areas of clean water, reliable power, and instant communication. Given the audience today is more interested on the power side, I would also add that our first power plant project was back in 1915 in our initial year, and it was in the small city of Atwood, Kansas. And over that 100 years, we've grown to be a large engineering construction firm. And today, we now work on projects around the globe, including 6 by 800 megawatt supercritical units in Africa, many of the latest technology combustion turbine projects and combined cycle projects throughout the U.S. But we're also moving towards and completing today projects in rooftop solar and microgrids. So that forms the basis of the perspective which we're going to share today. So the global power market today is influenced by a number of trends. But today I'm going to focus on 3 trends. Those are growth, interconnectivity, and uncertainty. With regard to growth, we see much of that being driven over the coming years by population growth, which will reach 9 billion people by the year 2050, 2/3 of which will be in large metropolitan cities. And to consider the implications of that population growth, I'd like to start with a few numbers around where we're at today to frame up this growth. But the global power demand today is 20 billion gigawatt hours. 5 trillion cubic meters per year are required for the water demand on a global basis for drinking water purposes. Now, for those of you in the power business, I think, at least for me, I found that hard to understand how much really that 5 trillion cubic meters was. And what that would equal is covering the entire eastern half of the United States from the Atlantic Ocean through to the Mississippi River, covering that with water to the depth of an Olympic swimming pool. So that gives you a context of how much usage there is. Of that water usage, about 10 to 15% of the freshwater use is for power. And so as the world grows and the demand for water increases, then it'll be incumbent on the power sector to find ways to deal with ever-increasing shortages. Now that amount of usage for the power business is enough to support the entire drinking water needs of North America. So as that evolves and as things change, we can all understand that that is a very significant portion. And we all know that as the drinking water sources come under pressure, that's likely to lead to pressure on the power sector to reduce that demand, because everyone's home and their ability to have fresh drinking water is probably going to play a trump card when it comes to the amount that's used in the power business. So as that fresh water increases by current levels about 20%, we expect those kinds of scenarios to continue to develop. But it also will impact the ability to deliver power in many regions around the world. As that power growth happens across the developing world, it will happen in many, many areas that do not have adequate supply today, let alone the needs of tomorrow. So let's discuss some of the implications of that. The increased population growth will cause a significant growth in the power demand to 50% more gigawatt hours. That obviously will drive increasing need for newer technologies, higher efficiency approaches, and more sustainable approaches in generation. As I said, we see there will be continued and increasing pressure to reduce the water use in all areas of the globe. And for power, one of the impacts is the expansion of solar and wind has a less intensive use of water, so that's a positive going forward. But we also see that today's and tomorrow's gas technologies and even coal technologies, where they are built around the globe, will require decreased amount of water usage as those new projects are built. Another area is interconnectivity and data, and as in all industries, the power industry is and will continue to see impacts from this interconnectivity. Today, about 45% of the world has access to the internet, which is nearly 3.2 billion people. This is an 800% increase since the year 2000. 78% of the users are from developed countries, with the balance from developing countries. By 2050, the projections are that there'll be 97% of the population interconnected, which will result in about 8.7 billion people connected. And the implications from that increased connectivity include consumers demanding more transparency, access to data, and that all drives more and more personal choices by those consumers. The result of all that data transfer then comes through the cloud, and that results today in about 1,500 terawatt hours of electricity annually. Now that's equal today to the amount of generation in Germany and Japan combined. So just today it's equal to those two countries' total generation. By 2035, what we see is total consumption of the cloud is estimated to be 4,000 terawatt hours, which begins to rival the total amount of generation around the globe for lighting purposes. The growth of that connectivity through 2050 will largely come in the developing world and occurs in many, many areas which already have water scarcity issues. So the need to deploy these communication networks to connect us all will clearly require reliable and sustainable power to support that growth. The last area I want to touch on as far as a trend is uncertainty. And that while there are clear trends, I think everyone here today has this general feeling of an overabundance of uncertainty. But my view is that uncertainty is unlikely to decrease given the rate of change in technology. And all of us need to begin to understand that and begin to embrace it and begin to adapt to that changing cycle and learn how to do that in order to survive. So what are some things we could do in the power sector to better address these needs? Well, on a global basis, we can address efficiency by continued focus on the reduction of losses in the power generation systems. We believe this could yield another 2 to 4% improvement in the thermal fleet. In addition, development of more robust and efficient grids and transmission and distribution systems could reduce the losses by 10 to 20%, as well as better provide access for the growing renewable generation fleet. Another area that could be dealt with today in this ever-increasing amount of uncertainty, it has to do with security. And on a global basis, we can develop more robust systems that prevent and deter exploitation of our physical assets, but also our cyber assets. In addition, it would help provide protection against the ever-growing effects of climate change and weather events around the world. So this provides enhanced reliability and makes a lot of sense all the way around the globe. And there are other items that can be done, but most of those are particular to the geographies and particular businesses that you're all involved in. From a global power market perspective, what we continue to see is two worlds. There's the developing world and the developed world. In that developed world, we see flat demand for power, renewal of aging assets, and that renewal can be accomplished by replacement of the age assets with lower carbon choices, or it could be uprates or efficiency improvements. In the developing world, we see a great need for capacity increases and the need for consistent and reliable access to electricity. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, 600 million people today live without access to electricity, mostly in remote areas, but in the cities there are many that are experiencing rolling blackouts. Solutions such as the 4 by 800 megawatt coal-fired plants in Kasili can address that. But also there's a much stronger opportunity for other technologies to address that going forward, including solar and distributed energy, both grid connected and not connected to the grid. So if you think about those remote areas, it's a much better option to deliver that power as you can in small amounts, even if it's not 100% reliable, even if it's not backed up by a very strong grid. You'll at least get some amount of power, connect them to the outside world, and provide some amount of power. Another opportunity in the developing world is the continued discovery of natural gas deposits around the globe and the ability to move that as a commodity through floating LNG projects, which make natural gas-fired generation much more competitive versus prior years. So in North America, a few specifics. Obviously, in each country, we're dealing with a different set of circumstances that impact the growth. But in Canada, the primary issue has to do with dealing with the mandate to retire the coal units, which are primarily in the western half of the country. And items such as the new Alberta CO2 tax could accelerate some retirements in that region. Long-term growth in Canada is largely driven by the oil industry, which is currently facing low oil prices and having an impact on the growth in that power sector today. In the U.S., the impacts are largely driven by regulations in the Clean Power Act, the new and finalized rules for water use, and increasing renewable portfolio standards. But in addition to that, distributed generation and renewables are impacting the utilities business models across the country, as well as the grid stability that's needed to provide reliable power across the states. In Mexico, the picture is much different. It's primarily driven today by the deregulation and modernization of the energy and fuel markets. And the other driver that's impeding that a bit today is the need for security, which everyone that's wanting to invest there and has the assets to do that is looking to do that in a secure manner for their projects. So a quick look at the Clean Power Plan, and clearly I'm not the expert on the Clean Power Plan. There'll be a number of speakers later in the day that will touch on this in more depth, including our Andy Byers. But at a high level, the implications on the U.S. fleet are coal will remain a smaller but significant portion of the overall mix. There will be a lot of opportunities for efficiency improvements on those plants. But once the state implementation plans are completed, then the focus will be on those projects that will be remaining in service. It's fairly clear now that the best of that coal fleet will remain online, but will require efficiency improvements to meet the SIPs. For nuclear, the finalized plan allows uprating of existing facilities, those under construction, and also future facilities to take advantage of the credits and trading markets. And then for natural gas, it's really intended as the backstop for renewables. So you heard several of the speakers today talk about the impact of renewables on the grid. Natural gas is the bridge to solve that problem, at least at this point in time. So with regard to renewables, there are a number of sources that have estimated the total spend on that block of renewables that will come online to meet the Clean Power Plan. But it's expected today that that will require as much as 15 to 20 billion per year. So some recent trends in project development. In North America, we're seeing today another cycle toward greater numbers of developer-led projects. What used to be an 80-20 mix of utility to developers today for us is more like a 50-50 mix. Now that cycle seems to go back and forth over the years, never lands in any one spot. But my view is that that's largely driven today by difference of views of the risks involved in moving projects forward. Another trend is an increasing preference for EPC projects as the delivery model. In our 2015 electric utility survey, our clients indicated that the advantage of executing projects under an EPC model were numerous and included fewer internal resources, price certainty, and clear lines of responsibility. Another trend has to do with the central stations and the movement towards first-of-a-kind technologies and the highest efficiencies. An example in the natural gas power generation sector is the need to use advanced class machines to remain competitive in markets like PJM and ERCOT. The benefits of these technologies provide for much faster startup and ramping to balance the renewables loads. And many times these gas generation projects are first-of-a-kind technology for our clients and occasionally for us as well. Another trend is the greater diversity of project size. So as you heard earlier, we started with a very small project in Atwood, Kansas, but today we're delivering large coal-fired projects around the globe. We're delivering large combined cycle projects around the country and around the globe. But we're also doing microgrids and rooftop solar projects. So that disparity in size is causing many of us to rework the approach to business, rework our business models, and make sure that we can handle a diverse size of projects. And the last trend we want to be able to talk about is the exploration of plant betterment and efficiency solutions. As utilities evaluate their options going forward, given the CPP, we're seeing strong interest from clients in finding all viable energy efficiency improvements to these assets. And these improvements have ranged anywhere between 1.5% on the low end to upwards of 5% on the high end. So what you see is a much more diverse set of projects and a much more complex environment in which to execute these going forward. So some considerations if you are considering EPC project development. Obviously, time is critical on any project, and the need for EPC is to start early on both the selection of the technology, but also to ensure permitting, financing, and other contracting gets done at a time to support the overall schedule and not put a squeeze on the execution period of the project. A significant consideration then is your choices of technologies, and as I mentioned earlier, we see a lot of choices that are first-of-a-kind technologies today. And in today's markets, utilizing modern technology is one way to gain a sustainable competitive advantage for your projects. But depending on your comfort level with these technologies, having a strong partner will make this type of risk far easier to accommodate. Flexibility in your contracting models and execution approaches is critical also. And understanding your desired level of involvement is often needed to optimize your contracting and execution models. It's always good to be open to a discussion about what those options might be, anywhere from full EPC, open to closed book, shared risk approaches, or a traditional approach. All of those are good choices depending on your personal circumstances and the partner that you're choosing. Increasingly, for all of us, collaboration is more important each and every day, and every project, no matter the contract or execution model, requires collaboration. The more engaged clients are with their EPC contractors, the better the opportunity is to deliver a project where everybody wins. The best results occur when you're willing to embrace collaboration and partnering concepts. The last item I'll cover here is risk and de-risk of projects. And understanding the options when it comes to risk sharing in complex EPC projects can be a significant advantage to ensuring the projects are done on time, on budget, and meet the performance requirements. As you do that, you should consider who is best positioned to mitigate the risk. Sometimes it's helpful to break down a risk into smaller parts and decide which party is better able to handle that in smaller portions. So I hope that the view from an engineer constructor today provided some help to you as you develop your strategies and your business plans to adapt to this ever-changing business. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to remind everyone that we will be opening the exhibit hall promptly at 11:30. There we have more than 1,400 companies exhibiting, so I hope it's a massive exhibit hall. It's the size of 6 or 7 football fields, so I hope you brought a good pair of walking shoes with you. All right. Well, our final speaker this morning is Robert Flexon. Mr. Flexon is the president and CEO of Dynegy, one of America's largest independent power producers. The company's power portfolio includes 35 power plants in 8 states. Together, those plants can generate up to 26,000 megawatts of power. Mr. Flexon was named president and CEO of Dynegy in 2011, and he has been the chief architect behind a major turnaround at the company. Before joining Dynegy, Mr. Flexon was the Chief Financial Officer at UGI Corporation. He also served as CEO of Foster Wheeler, a global engineering and construction firm. He also held several high-ranking positions at NRG Energy. We're very lucky to have him here with us today. Please put your hands together for Mr. Robert Flexon. Thank you, Robert.
Well, thank you, Russell, and describing it as very lucky to have me here today. You probably should have waited about 20 minutes to say that's the case. So far the presentations have been pretty uplifting. I mean, Joe talked about what's going on at GE Power, and certainly with their acquisition of Alstom is a lot of growth coming their way, particularly with Clean Power Plan. And I would say at Dynegy, we're one of the largest service agreement customers in GE Power, and they have been an outstanding partner to us. And I can't thank GE enough for how much they've helped us during our restructuring period. Steve talked about Cal ISO. We have plants in California, and California ISO really does an amazing job of integrating the renewables into the grid and bringing reliability every day. I mean, it goes unnoticed, and it shouldn't be understated, the accomplishment. And still, I mean, anytime you can work Disneyland and In-N-Out Burger into a presentation, you can't help but be happy, right? And of course, Black & Veatch, and Steve just goes through Black & Veatch and 100 years of being in business, and it's a great accomplishment to have that type of resilience. So that takes us to the independent power producer space. This is where it gets a little bit uglier, and I'll try to keep it uplifting as much as I can, but it's going to be hard. Anytime your stock price goes down by 60% in 3 months, you kind of feel beaten. So just generally, start out with what's the footprint of Dynegy. Again, 26,000 megawatts, as Russell introduced, and it's split roughly evenly between gas and coal. We generate about 120 million megawatt hours a year. Again, 50-50 between gas and coal. And we've really focused our expansion. When we went through a restructuring and went into a bankruptcy in 2011, right after I joined, exited in October of 12 with 9,000 megawatts. We really focused on investing in PGM and ISO New England because of the market design. So we really expanded our footprint there, and today we're the largest combined cycle generator in PGM and in ISO New England. So it's really as a focused expansion strategy to those markets, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So we can take a look at 2015, and we talk about this presentation being around transition and transformation. I mean, 2015 certainly has ushered in a really dramatic change that we haven't seen before in the power industry. 18 gigawatts of coal plant retirements during the course of the year, the most gas burn ever from the power sector, significant renewable build, 11 gigs of renewable build. And what really has been a surprise, I think, to the industry is just how much stress the nuclear units have been under pressure, and the fact that you have retirements happening, 2,100 megawatts of announced and another upwards to 5,000 megawatts at risk for retirement. So really is changing the landscape of what generation looks like. And what we haven't seen yet is the impact on volatility in the marketplace. And when you think about one of the things that's overhanging the independent power producer, I mean, we live and die on market prices. And when you think about, particularly as it relates to the Northeast, if you think about last summer it was mild, last winter it was mild, and every forecast that you see for this year's mild winter with a significant El Nino effect impacting the weather outlook for the year. So you take those things together, and it's you're not really testing the system yet. And one of the investment thesis for investing in an independent power producer is there's a lot of retirements happening. And as those retirements happening, these are assets that typically run a lot, nuclear, coal, and if they come out of the grid, they're going to be replaced by higher cost units. But we haven't seen that test yet because we haven't hit those type of peak demand periods. So it's been masking it somewhat. And then the other big change in the market, particularly in the Northeast, again with PGM in New England, is now you're going to be paid for reliability and you're going to be punished for the lack of reliability. So PGM started the capacity performance product, New England's got performance incentive, and if you don't deliver when you're called upon in a shortage event, the penalties are significant. And that's going to bring another wave of retirements for plants, the older plants that are typically maybe peaking units, oil-fired units that don't run a lot. And when they're called on in a shortage period, they're not able to respond because of reliability issues or whatever the case may be, not being able to make it on the grid fast enough. It's going to be a case where you have substantial penalties, and the risk reward isn't there. So I think that's going to bring another wave of retirements into our near future. So again, just taking a look at where we fit in all of this, you have the restructured markets or the competitive markets, wholesale competition, which is what we have. Then you got the regulated transmission operators and retail competition. We have retail business in Illinois and Ohio that serves about 24 million megawatt hours a year, and we do that in a competitive retail environment. And then the other markets are the traditional integrated utilities, which life is a lot better for them because they get reimbursed based on cost or asset based rather than having to suffer the beating that we take in the market at times. And you can see on the slide there that some of the average prices across the markets for power, and the red ones are the competitive states, blue ones are just a selection of the regulated states, and you can see the California price is quite high, which ties into the great California experiment that Steve alluded to. I mean, we favor competition and the competitive markets. If you look at the price of retail power over the past 15 years, the price in the deregulated markets has actually declined, whereas the regulated markets, it's actually increased by 3%, so there's about a 4% spread between the two over the time period. So let me go through some of the things that are really influencing the markets these days. And first of all, I'll start with the market design. And these are some of my quick descriptions of not all markets are created equally. And if you take it from an independent power producer, we love New England, we love PGM. The other markets are a little bit more difficult. You got the quasi-regulated, which is Mid-Continent ISO, which is in the orange area of the map. And that's a particularly difficult one for us because you've got all regulated states, and it's the orange ones on the map, except for central and southern Illinois. That's a competitive market. And so you have a situation where we're trying to compete being surrounded by 10 regulated states, and their bidding behavior is very different from a competitive generator. They will always enter their capacity in the capacity market at zero because they get reimbursed through rates. We have to bid in, and when you've got everybody else bidding in at zero, you're not going to get a whole lot. And that's why when it comes to the Clinton nuclear plant owned by Exelon, and you look at our coal plants in Illinois, they struggle economically because of the design of the market, mixing two business models in one ISO, which is a very difficult thing. As I mentioned before, PGM in New England are ones that we really like. It has the design characteristics we like in a market: 3-year forward view, slope demand curve, minimum offer price rules. So it's designed much better in terms of paying for the capacity, the reliability, and the energy. So when you look at those three markets that we're in pretty heavily, you get a picture of the compensation. So the capacity market's there to ensure long-term reliability, to send the price signal when new builds should be occurring. And you can see under the PGM column on the slide that the compensation has been pretty good. The most recent auction for 2018-2019 cleared at $180 a megawatt day, which is certainly a very strong clear. And ISO New England, similar to PGM, at prices similar, expressed in dollars per kW, but it's actually, you take the prices there, it's actually over $200 per megawatt day. Within MISO, it's much different. The auction is 2 months in advance of the planning year. And you bid in, and there's no slope demand curve. As soon as they meet the amount of megawatts they need, it's a vertical demand curve. So if you have 1 megawatt more supply than demand, everything above that gets zero. And even though Zone 4, where we are, broke out separately, and you cleared at $150 a megawatt day, we only did that for 500 megawatts. We've got a 7,000 megawatt fleet. And then again, we take a look at all the regulated utilities in the surrounding states, and they're getting $300 a megawatt day for 100% of their capacity. So mixing again those two models is just creates a real disadvantage for a competitive generator. But probably the biggest thing that's really impacted the market, it's all about the gas. And if you take a look, in 2010, look at the price of gas in Ohio relative to Henry Hub. You had a basis step up above the Henry Hub price, and matter of fact, in all the markets that I showed there. But then look at 2010 compared to 2015 year to date, and you see Ohio is at a substantial discount now to Henry Hub. So Ohio in the green bar and Henry Hub in the purple bar. So that's really changed everything in the markets, and that's what's created a lot of stress. There's been 15 times this year that we've purchased delivered gas for our Ohio and our plants in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York, where we purchase gas for less than $1. So when investors say, geez, Henry Hub's at $2.50, what happens if it goes down $1? Well, I can tell you, on 15 days, that means the price was negative for gas. So I don't think it's going to go down that far. But that's really what has been of such a disruptive force in this market, is seeing natural gas prices doing what they're doing, particularly in the Northeast, with trading at a discount to Henry Hub. And that's really triggered some market behavior issues that have, again, tearing at the fabric of the competitive markets. And so I'm going to try not to go on a rant here, which is very difficult. And if anybody from AEP or First Energy here, I'm trying not to offend you, but I'm not going to try hard. And for all of you Ohio businesses and customers that are about to get your bills jacked up because of the political pork that's going on, feel free to be angry with me. And I hope there's no writers or press here, right? So what's happening in Ohio? Well, this is a state, of course, the governor is running for president, and he's running on a platform of free market, less regulation, less taxes. Let businesses solve the problem. Let markets solve the problem. That's not what's happening in Ohio, right? First Energy has worked out a kind of a backroom deal with the PUCO staff where they're going to get a PPA, a power purchase agreement, for 8 years that's going to cost consumers $3.9 billion. They go, why are you doing that? It's like, I have no idea why they're doing that, but you take a look at, they just cleared their megawatts. They just cleared their 3 gigawatts in the capacity markets, and they're going to get a few $1 billion over the next 3 years for clearing in the capacity market. And they're now obligated to run for the balance of the decade. So why do you need a PPA? You've got an obligation for the next 3 years. You just cleared $3 billion. But yet you're going to get an above-market compensation to a coal plant and to a nuclear plant. Now, that changes the bidding behavior of a generator, and why the amount of gigawatts isn't some monstrous amount that's going to affect the market so much, but it just tears away at the fabric of the competitive market, and I certainly hope PGM is going to defend its market. I certainly hope FERC is going to step in and say you can't do that. Certainly when it goes to the PUCO commissioners, I certainly hope they actually vote it down, because that's actually just a terrible sign for independent power producers. And when you think about the overhang affecting the equity of a lot of the independent power producers, it's this type of behavior that's very disruptive to the market. So you either need to be regulated or you need to be unregulated. You can't have a market that starts combining things. And AEP's they're on the heels of First Energy trying to get a deal as well. So we're certainly going to fight against that, but that's again, something that's been triggered by the natural gas prices being as low as they are, and some of the integrated utilities or utilities that have a history of getting regulated returns don't like the competitive market suddenly. Exelon is doing kind of the same thing in Illinois. They're looking to get a low carbon portfolio standard subsidy for their generation as well. And again, it's state regulators picking winners and losers, and it's just very disruptive to the market. So I'm going to try not to get any more negative. I better get off this slide. So, well, this isn't going to make me any happier. So now we have the federal government. And folks, the war on coal is alive and well. We got regulation that keeps coming at us. We got, we've made it through Casper, MATS. Coal combustion residuals is now here. Effluent limitation guidelines is now here. Regional haze is on its way. 316B for water. All those things you can generally cope with. What's difficult again is the federal government also kind of picking the winners and losers by subsidizing certain types of generation and not subsidizing other types of generation. But certainly it makes it, you combine those regulations with the price of natural gas, and it just makes it a very challenging environment for a coal portfolio. And you think about our fleet, 120 million megawatt hours, half coal, half gas. 80% of our gross margin these days comes from gas. So, Dynegy has really changed from a company that was coal heavy to now we're very gas heavy. And, again, 80% of our margin coming from our gas fleet in light of these types of things. Just a couple of quick words on Clean Power Plan. I've highlighted here the states in which we do business. And in most of the states, we're a gas generator. And when you look at the final targets for carbon intensity or emission rates in these various states, it's about what a combined cycle puts out. So, we think it's going to be pretty manageable for those particular states. The states that we have to worry about is Illinois and Ohio, where we do have coal assets, where the emission profile highlighted by the yellow line across the top is a typical coal plant emission rate of CO2. And the green line is the typical emission rate of the combined cycle units. And you got to get down by 2030 to the dark blue line. So what we've got to be focused on is how do you work with the state on their state implementation plans? Is it going to be a regional carbon allowance program, similar to California in the West or the RGGI states in the East. We've got to work through all those things. And again, how the clean power plant gets developed may or may not be another disruptive force. But it's going to be very difficult, in the marketplace. And how are the price signals being sent out there for the independent guys, the market guys, to make the investments that you have to make for efficiency or new build or the like? Are the price signals going to be there? Or is the price signals going to be distorted by, again, subsidies and the like? And I think that's the real challenge for us around the clean power plan. Will there be proper price formation in the markets to signal the investment and get compensated for your assets and the services they provide? As Steve mentioned earlier, within California, it's not about capacity anymore, it's about capability. And in those markets where you need the fossil generation to really firm the renewables, we've got to make sure we're being compensated for those services as well. So just kind of as the final slide, I've got 54 seconds and counting before I guess you'll be stampeding for the lunchroom. But in terms of what should be done, I guess just a couple really high-level comments. I mean, the most important thing is allow the markets to work. If we're going to, in this country, if we're going to have some integrated, regulated states and some unregulated, that's fine, but just don't mix the two. Let the market develop proper price formation in the competitive markets and stay away from the subsidies for one type of generation versus the other type of generation, because what this country needs overall is a diverse fuel mix, but if you start picking the winners and the losers, you're going to end up with something different. And we really wanted to avoid discriminating from one technology to the other and ensure that price formation is done in a very transparent way and it's not being done one-off here and there. And it all gets back to that, the prices that are set, generators need to be compensated for the services, for the capital, for the investments that they make. And we just need to abide by those market rules and make sure the market has certain design features like a forward planning horizon, like a slope demand curve, not a vertical demand curve, and things like a minimum offer price rule so you can't get certain units going in there artificially suppressing price for various reasons because they have a contract or the like. So that's kind of the takeaway. I'm sorry to be so negative on the last talk. It's the independent power space is just having a very difficult time right now, and I need therapy, so thank you for... Thanks for helping.
Hang on. Well, folks, that concludes our keynote session for today. You have heard from some of the biggest decision makers in the industry. We have covered the entire industry. So one last time, put your hands together for our keynote speakers. You are excused. The exhibit hall is now open for your inspection. Have a great conference. Merry Christmas and God bless.